Okay, so we've got some people who've joined us now, and I think we're just about ready to get started. Emma, are you ready to go?
Yes. Yep,
Oh,
all ready.
okay. Everyone else, I hope you're ready because we're going to get this product success session off the road. All right, or on the road rather. So let's talk about what these product success sessions are. So what we do is each month we focus on a different area of ProdPad and how you use it. And really what we're doing is discussing how you set up ProdPad and how you implement it. And we're talking about specific areas or different flows or different jobs that you're trying to get done within the app. And we're here to share best practice and functionality for success within ProdPad. And so this is a space that you can ask your questions. Everyone here on the call is a product person, so feel free to share your own examples and experiences, and we'll be sharing some of our own and other things that we've seen from other people who use ProdPad, because as we're all product people, we're all learning from each other. So there's an option within the Zoom webinar where you can raise your hand and we'll invite you to talk. Other great thing is that this session is recorded and we're going to be able to share it afterwards with everyone. So if you had a colleague who couldn't make it today, or if you wanted to have a record of this later, then we'll be sharing this around for you later. I should probably introduce myself, by the way. Hi, my name is Jana. I am the CEO and co-founder of ProdPad, and I'm also co-founder of Mind the Product, which is the community and series of events for product people. And I'm actually a product person at heart. I mean, before starting ProdPad, I was a product manager, just trying to do my job, and I just didn't have tools to do so. I came from a customer support background before that. And even today, even though my day-to-day isn't necessarily in the day-to-day doing product, I'm still a product person at heart and very much consider myself a product person. So very happy to be here and glad to be sharing this with you guys.
And hi everyone, I'm Emma, your account manager at ProdPad, and my dog Meg in the picture too. Hopefully she'll stay quiet for us today. Previously, I used to be a product manager at a learn tech company where I actually implemented ProdPad myself. So I've been in your position where looking at the context of my company and how to implement ProdPad. And I'm also a co-organizer of Product Tank Oxford. So I basically just like talking about product with product people quite literally all of the time. But before that, I actually was a project manager in the University of Warwick, where I focused on global education projects. So thanks, Jana, for kicking us off. In this session today, we'll be looking specifically at nurturing ideas in your product backlog, and we'll cover a few key areas. So what ideas are, where ideas can come from, and how ProdPad can support with that continuous discovery and keeping those ideas moving. But I guess first off, what actually is an idea? So ideas can be any size. They could be quite big ideas that end up being a future new product in the end, or they could be really small things such as simple UI changes like changing the color of a button for whatever reason, and obviously anything in between. But really, they should be a potential solution to a defined problem. And that's why on every idea in ProdPad, we ask you to consider both the problem to be solved, so that's from your end user or customer point of view, and then also the value to your business. So if when you're adding ideas to ProdPad, if those two key questions can't be answered, then maybe it's something that's not quite worth pursuing, at least right now. And as Teresa Torres says, there's no such thing as a good or bad idea. There's just lots of opportunities and different potential solutions that are to be reviewed and validated. This is an example of what Teresa Torres's opportunity solution tree looks like. If you haven't seen it before, hopefully it's familiar to some of you. And ProdPad supports this type of approach. So making sure that you are gathering all ideas from across the business and validating those against what your desired outcome is. So it shows that there's not just one way of doing something, and we all can be guilty of having a great idea and then getting all behind that, sometimes at the detriment of other ideas. So it's helpful to remove that bias for our own ideas. And so this is what our hierarchy looks like in ProdPad. You've got your product lines that houses all of your products, and each product will have its own roadmap. which has its own roadmap cards within that roadmap, highlighting the defined problems that you're looking to explore. And then you've got those ideas on those roadmap cards, which are all the different potential solutions or experiments that you could run to try and solve that problem. And then on those ideas, you've got multiple pieces of feedback that can help to, as part of that validation process for your ideas. If you are interested in exploring feedback management a bit more, we actually did that topic on our last product success session. So you can find the link in our help center if that's something that you're interested in too. So this is what an idea looks like in ProdPad. You'll all hopefully be familiar with it. And we give you the workspace required to document key aspects for your idea. So on every idea, you want to add in a title and a description and answer that key business case that I mentioned at the start about the problem and value. And also you can add any key attributes as well. So what product does that idea relate to, or multiple products, what roadmap cards, what problems identified that idea might relate to as well. If you aren't using personas yet, then personas are really useful for not only helping you to focus on who you're sort of targeting or who might be affected by that idea that you're working on, which is obviously useful for everyone that's helping to validate and scope out that idea. But it's also useful for filtering down your ideas as well. So if you are working on your roadmap priorities, and you want to specifically say increase revenue, and you had a persona that had purchasing power, then you could filter down all those ideas by that persona, and it just makes it easier to find ideas that are relevant to your roadmap. Tags also are useful for adding contextual information. So if you're struggling a little bit with tags, they tend to be really just for the context of your organization, either to highlight a piece of information that you want to share. So it could be about what teams are working on the ideas or involved. It could be about the area of the tool, a specific customer. So highlighting that information, or information you want to filter ideas by, which again could be any of those things, or it could be like a vertical industry or target market, for example. And then also on all our ideas, you have space for documenting the scope and spec for that idea. So user stories, if you work with user stories in your organization, designs, so that you can add specific designs. Your design team, your designers can add them into ProdPad, keep them all alongside that context of your idea, alongside things like functional specs. If you're working on documents outside of ProdPad, you can add files and add any notes in there. So sort of set the scene with what an idea is like, what an idea is from a ProdPad perspective. So over to you now. Jana's going to put up the poll question about how often do you nurture your backlog? So if you could fill in the poll, and if you have any questions or want to note something in the chat, then just let us know. We'll give you a few seconds, and then Jana and I will let you know a little bit more about how often we nurture our backlog at ProdPad.
Okay, so our poll is up, and I'm starting to see some of the results coming in. We've got a good chunk of you have answered. Anybody else? You should be able to see that poll. If you can't see it, then let us know. I also got a note from somebody here. Thanks, Jules, for pointing out that my audio wasn't great. Hopefully this is better. Yes, thank you. It sounds better, so that's good. All right, so on our side, our backlog nurturing is something that is done on an ongoing basis. But I mean, I guess it's something you could say we do a couple times a week, more of a dedicated sort of way. The feedback backlog happens on an ongoing basis because people are constantly giving us feedback. But what we tend to do is pull ideas out of the backlog, and they go into the development backlog as new things go out of development and go live, because we release live a couple times a week. But then we go through our existing backlog and go through the unsorted list once or twice a week, and just make sure that we are keeping on top of that and seeing where that fits in with other things, deduplicating stuff, and just trying to keep on top of that. One of the things that we find helps is making sure that none of our ideas ever go into the gray. You've probably noticed in the past that ideas in ProdPad start off as hot pink and then fade away to gray. And so that's always the worst when you see something disappearing like that. And so we always try to keep on top of that, make sure that nothing gets completely waylaid like that. Emma, anything from your side that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think part of the thing that's different working at ProdPad than other places I've worked before is, I think just having that continuous review and nurturing of your backlog does make it easier and does make the product team feel a bit less like a blocker. I know I felt like a blocker before because I just haven't been able to keep up. And something we'll delve into later is sort of how ProdPad can help you keep that that process moving. Can you see, Jana, what most other people on the webinar today voted?
The results, yes, I've got the results. So I've got 88% of people have voted, which is great. So I'm going to end the polls here. Thanks, everyone. Oh, 92. Yes, somebody got their last vote in. Thank you very much. All right. So I'm going to end the polls there. And we've got our numbers. All right. So what did you guys say? I'm not actually sure if you guys can see these results. Let me see. Oh, we've got a share results button here. How about we just click share results and see what happens?
Perfect.
There we go. So we can all now all see the results, so I don't have to read them all out. But the once a week was the winner here, with 32% of us saying that that they nurtured their backlog once a week, once a fortnight for any Americans in the room. Sorry, that's a Britishism for every 2 weeks. And it seems like it's something that people are doing quite often. I mean, if you add up once a fortnight, once a week, and a couple times a week, that's a good at least half of people here are spending that you know, a good chunk of your time doing so, which I think adds which I think lines up with what we see anecdotally from people. You know, an interesting anecdote that I find, and I've always found with ProdPad, is that we find a lot of people come to us because they're looking for roadmap solutions, right? Because product managers often say, oh, I need to do a roadmap really quickly because I've got the board meeting coming up tomorrow, or I've got, you know, I need to get my roadmap out because everyone's wondering what we're doing. So we got a lot of people coming to us for road mapping, but in reality, the most successful customers are the ones who spend their time doing idea management and backlog nurturing. And I think that goes in line with the nature of product management, because our job is not to make roadmaps, right? Like day to day, that's not what we do. Day to day, we spend our time looking at ideas and understanding problems from our customers and understanding opportunities out there in the market. And that is essentially backlog nurturing. That's, you know, looking at the different opportunities out there and coming up with potential solutions and moving those ideas forward so that they can actually be applied to some of these problems that we're seeing out there.
Absolutely. So I'm impressed actually that, you know, like Jana said, most of you are doing it that regularly. Normally when I have one-to-one calls with customers, I would suggest that you are doing it regularly like that. So well done. And obviously if anyone else that isn't doing it as regularly and you are struggling with finding a way to manage that backlog more often, obviously we'll talk through some of those things now, but you can always book in a chat with us as well if you want to discuss it further, but more tips to come. So we've identified what ideas are, but how do you actually get the ideas into ProdPad in the first place? You might have experienced someone when you're grabbing a coffee in the morning, someone saying they've had like a great idea in the night and they've got to tell you all about it, or you are in a meeting and you've been talking about a certain area of the tool and someone's got a great idea that you just like, we've absolutely got to do this, it's going to like change the world. So you need to capture these ideas in order to validate them. And so we have lots of ways to do this in ProdPad. But I think it's really important to think about where to gather these ideas from. And it can be quite overwhelming as a product person, you know, having these ideas coming from all over the place to feel a bit overwhelmed. But it is important to not just have ideas come from the product team. You have lots of people across the business that have different interactions with both the product and customers. So it's important to encourage them and gather their ideas as well. For example, your development team, your engineering team will be working in the software daily. They might have ideas on how to improve the product, you know, technically speaking, but also just to make things easier as well to use. Also customer success and support, they're talking to customers on a daily basis as well, listening to their problems, listening to their pain points. So they're going to have great ideas as well of how to improve the product. Sales are speaking to your potential customers. They're going to hear where they win, where your product wins over others, and the reasons behind that. Equally, when you lose a sale, you know, what was the reasoning behind that as well. So they're going to have valuable ideas. And similarly, marketing, they're going to understand the differentiation in the market, and where the product stands out and how you can make better use out of that. And equally, if you know, sort of where competitors are doing well as well. So there's lots of valuable ideas to be gathering, and it's important to not be afraid to gather those ideas from these different places. So using ProdPad, we have lots of different ways that you can easily gather these ideas from your colleagues. Some of these you might already be using, some of them you might not be aware of. We have an email Dropbox. So on each of your accounts, you'll have an email address so that you can send ideas directly into ProdPad, and your users of the account can as well. It's idea plus the company name, your account name, at prodpad.com. If you aren't sure what your company name is or your account name is at ProdPad, it might be different when you set up your account, and you might have changed it along the way. Just drop us a line, we'll double check it for you, and you can get using that. But that's a great way of, if you're getting lots of emails in the product team, or you just want your colleagues to just email ideas straight to ProdPad, the email Dropbox is a great way to do that.
And one thing to add to that is that we do have the option of customizing that for you. So if idea plus your company name at prodpad.com is a bit of a mouthful for people, you could set up something like ideas at acme.com or whatever your own domain is, and we can map that for you, and people can use that email address instead. And that's probably a lot easier for people to remember. And it's just a few steps on our side and a couple steps on your side to get that domain mapping working, or that email mapping working.
Absolutely. So just drop us a line if that's something that you're interested in, or use the in-app chat if you'd like us to set that up for you. Equally, if you're using Slack, then we do have a Slack integration. You might have noticed on our roadmap that this is a key area for us at the moment, so you'll be seeing a lot of improvements with the Slack integration. But how it works will still stand in that your colleagues can actually add ideas and indeed feedback directly into ProdPad from Slack. So they can just say hashtag idea and what the idea is, and that will go straight into ProdPad for you to then review through your unsorted backlog. Equally, they can search for ideas directly in Slack. So it just means that if Slack is where most of the work happens, you can just pull the information from ProdPad, send some information to ProdPad without actually having to go into ProdPad itself. And then we also have the Chrome extension. So if you're using Chrome browser, or your colleagues are using Chrome, then they can add the quick add as a Chrome extension directly to their browser. So while they are having customer calls or using Salesforce or whatever their day-to-day tools are, they can easily add any ideas directly into ProdPad without actually having to log in as well. So that's a great other tool for you as well.
One of my favorite features of that one, and I found it something that a lot of Chrome extensions don't get right, or a lot of extensions don't get right, is that they require a login for it. And so they're constantly logging you out, which kind of defeats the purpose. Ours is actually based on an API key. So you enter that key once, and that way whoever's using it is always logged in. And that way you don't have to worry about, when you click the quick add, you get to add an idea, whether you've remembered to log into ProdPad that week or not. One of the assumptions we made really early on with ProdPad is that ProdPad is just one of many tools in your stack, especially when you start bringing other people into your product management process. Like your salespeople are going to be out and about, on the go, doing their thing. Your support people, your developers, your marketers, they all have great ideas, but they also have jobs to do. They're not opening up ProdPad first thing on Monday morning and getting excited about it. They've got other things that they're working on. They get excited about ideas when they hear about stuff that they think might contribute to it, when they hear about something moving forwards. But for the most part, they've got their stuff to do. And so what we've actually done is made the assumption that everyone in the team has it. The product managers will be, but the support people won't be, the sales people won't be, and that's okay. And that's why we've created all these inroads for them, so they can email their ideas in, they can use a Chrome extension without even having to log in, they can use a Slack integration. Again, they don't have to be logged in. They just have to use the tools that they do day to day. So think about all the places that your team is having these conversations, what kind of tools they use, and we can help you hook up ProdPad to it so that they can keep doing their thing without them having to change their patterns hugely to still contribute and help out with your access to product management.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you might be thinking then as well, how to avoid duplication of ideas as well. Not every colleague, even though we do have a great search within ProdPad, not everyone, and I'm guilty of this as well, is good at searching for ideas before they add their new bright idea that they've had. So we actually have intelligent suggestions. So if I was to add in a Salesforce integration that I think is a great idea, ProdPad will actually look for other relevant integrations and ideas based on what I've typed, and will find the relevant ones, including, oh, there's a Salesforce integration. So rather than me then adding that as a new one, I can then vote on that idea and click through and maybe take part in the discussion around what that looks like and why I think it's a great idea too. So we've tried to add in other support as well to avoid duplication of ideas as well.
Yeah, and that happens at the feedback level as well. So if you add feedback, it'll actually help you link things up as well. Plus, didn't we get a really, really exciting demo from our development team this morning of something coming up in the product canvas?
Yeah, so as well as at the moment, the intelligent suggestions come through on the quick add, it's actually, we are currently looking at it being on the actual ideas canvas as well. So little, what do we call him, RoboPad or something, will appear and suggest other ideas that will be related to the idea that you're looking at. So that's going to be really useful as well.
Yeah, really excited to hear about that. Now, as you know, we can't give you any dates on when that's coming out, but the work is beginning on it in the next sprint. So all really, really promising, and the wireframes look really exciting and great. So hopefully we have something really cool to show you guys soon.
Yes, yeah. Hopefully by the next time we can show you that as well.
Yeah.
So time for our next poll then. So how do you encourage colleagues to share their ideas? We'll put the poll up and give you a couple of seconds, and then Jana and I can talk about how we at ProdPad encourage colleagues outside of product team to share ideas.
Now, I've just launched this poll, so you guys go ahead and get answering there. Now, we did actually have a couple good questions come in, so I'll take a minute to answer one of those. So Jules asked, he said that he'd be interested in understanding our process about how we go about nurturing the backlog, like what are our process and steps. Now, it's quite a complicated system or complicated process, so I'm not going to be able to go into it detail. But the thing with nurturing a backlog is that you have to look at it from multiple angles. So we look at it both from a top-down approach as well as a bottom-up approach. So the top-down approach is looking at the big chunky problems we want to solve and what our objectives are as a company, right? In terms of our vision, we want to be this type of company in the future, and therefore what are the obstacles in front of us? What are our objectives over the next couple of quarters, and therefore what kind of problems do we need to tackle and what sort of initiatives might come out of that. And that'll help us prioritize some of the things in our backlog and help us figure out which things we want to go work on or whatever else. So that might point us in the direction saying, oh, well, we should go find ideas that are going to get us engagement from enterprise users, for example, if that we decide that we need to get, enterprise engagement up or something like that, right? If that's one of our core objectives, and then go work on those ideas and figure out the business case and figure out if it still matches that particular use case or whatever else. Sometimes it actually comes from the bottom up, which is looking at, almost you hear about these groundswells of details coming in from people where you've got all these requests coming in, somebody saying, oh, well, you know, so-and-so's just launched this new API and this new opportunity's just opened up. So maybe we should jump on that and make sure that we tackle that particular thing so we get in there first. Sometimes you'll hear about something in terms of, you know, new trends or new opportunities that come on the horizon. Like all of a sudden we realized that OKRs became a popular request, and so we decided to flesh out our OKR section of the app, and that was in response to changes in how the market was, and that was based on us listening to our customers itself. And then you get into the nitty gritty. Like as you start selecting different ideas and problems to solve, you start nurturing those ideas in terms of, well, let's send pieces of it over to the product team, to the product design team to figure out some loose wireframes to figure out if this is something that's going to be interesting for people or not, to do some basic research on it to find out if there's areas in there that could be improved or not. And start getting higher and higher definition specs and wireframes and whatever else before it gets moved onto the roadmap and before it gets moved over to development. So in reality, ideas can come from all different directions and they can be promoted into the roadmap from different directions, just depending on the context and what's happening in the market and everything else. So I wish there was like one silver bullet, you know, linear way of saying this is where we start and this is how it finishes. But there isn't, and there never has been, and I don't think there ever will be. And that's okay, because ProdPad isn't designed to give you that silver bullet of exactly how to do it, but it's designed to give you that visibility of all the different moving pieces that you can make better decisions and see that there's new opportunities coming up or problems on the horizon or whatever else you might need to know about as you're making these product decisions. All right, so we've got the polling just about done here.
Awesome.
And I'm going to share the results so everyone can see.
Cool.
And coming out on top, we have, well, pretty much a good chunk of you are asking people to encourage everyone to share ideas using ProdPad. Now, I might actually see a flaw in this thing because I think you can only pick one.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can only pick one. But please put in the chat if you do use multiple, then it would be interesting to understand that as well.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would have said all of the above to this. So perhaps this is a lesson learned for us. I wonder if the people who said using ProdPad means that they're only using ProdPad. To which I would say, hey, have you thought of connecting the Slack or the email Dropbox, the Chrome extension and other things like that? And I'd also be surprised if only 29% of you were using ProdPad, because I'm hoping that a lot more of you here are actually using ProdPad. But obviously, you know, if you're using Slack and other stuff, then you know, that's all going to go into ProdPad itself, anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But obviously, depending on if it is just one of those or multiple that you are using, then maybe consider some of the things that we've talked about to encourage your colleagues to share ideas and get those into ProdPad. And obviously, if you do want to talk about any of those further, then reach out to us and we're always happy to talk that through.
Excellent. Pete Goodall has just said that he uses the top 3 mostly. So yeah, this confirms that some people here are saying that they were trying to answer multiple, but so be it. We have learned. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. All right. So we've learned a little bit about how we encourage colleagues to share their ideas, and there's always more than one way of doing it.
Absolutely. So we've captured all ideas now, and we're encouraging colleagues to generate and share these ideas. But how do you actually know what ideas that you're going to progress, and how do you make that clear with the rest of your organization and communicate that? So this is where the validation of your ideas comes in, because not all ideas are actually worth pursuing, or at least, you know, right now. And so ideas functionality within ProdPad helps you to work in an agile way and keep this discovery of ideas going alongside delivery so that you're not a blocker. And as I mentioned before, this was something that I found and really appreciated about ProdPad when I implemented it as a product manager, because so often I was a blocker to ideas progression because I just hadn't worked with colleagues to scope them out. Whereas when I had ProdPad and with some of the functionality I'll show you shortly, I was able to keep those ideas, that discovery process moving, which then kept the development work flowing as well. And so this is one of the key principles of keeping your product ideas backlog in ProdPad and keeping it separate from your development backlog, which might be in something like JIRA. Because not only does this then benefit your development team by allowing their backlog to just be full of refined tickets that have been well scoped, they've been prioritized, they're ready to go right now, but it also means that you have the right workflow for you and the product team within the that discovery phase for your ideas as well, and so that you can keep that ideas progression moving. And so if you've ever been on a call with me, you'll know that I think the workflow is a really key area in ProdPad, and this is what will help you to keep those ideas moving. It's intended to help you document like a transparent ideation process, and it's not just intended to sort of reflect your development backlog statuses. So as you can see from this example, we haven't just got ready for development onwards and through the development process, we've actually got assessment and discovery as well. So you should have in ProdPad in your workflow, what are the ideation steps before you decide something's ready for development? And that might be include other types of stages as well. So like a design stage or a needs priority scoring. If you always have a regular sprint planning meeting, for example, put that as a column in your workflow as well. So this will benefit you not only to make sure that all of your ideas sort of go through that same process. It makes it more difficult for them to jump the queue. They're always going to be validated, but it also helps you to explain to colleagues what the ideation process is, so they'll feel like they're able to share their ideas because they understand the process of that validation. They won't feel like they're not being listened to, and they have the benefit of easily being able to track the status of that idea as well. Something that you might not be aware of is you can also create a saved workflow. So if you have different colleagues, say a design team might only want to see the stages up to development, for example, then they can actually save a filtered workflow, and that makes it easier to get the right view for your different teams. So that's something worth looking at as well. Another area around validation is actually discussions. And this is really useful for validating and scoping with your colleagues. It can help to reduce the number of different meetings that you might be having across your engineering colleagues, your design colleagues, other colleagues in the product team. So that's useful in itself, saving you time and not having to have all those face-to-face meetings. But also you then have the added benefit of all of that discussion is actually documented, and it's alongside the context of your idea. So you can see where those decision points were, you can see how the conversations progressed and that idea has developed, and keep track of all of that alongside that idea as it's being nurtured through that workflow. And then also to aid with prioritization and validation, you can also gather specific feedback on ideas from your feedback portal. So if this isn't something you're already doing, you can actually select if you want certain ideas in your backlog to be shown on your feedback portal. So this will enable you not only to just gather feedback that your customers, your end users want to share with you, but they can also look at specific ideas in your backlog that you are interested in getting feedback on from them. So this is an example from our actual feedback portal. So you're sort of extending it outside then of your internal team as well, and asking your customers for specific feedback on ideas that maybe are more in that in the near term of your roadmap, something you're exploring, whether there's sort of worthwhile pursuing that. You can gather that feedback here as well. But then how does this then relate to your road mapping activities? And I think this I spotted this might have come up as a bit of a question. So once you have, like Jana said, it's not necessarily, there's not really a linear process between whether it's you do your roadmap first and then you work out ideas, or you work out your ideas and then a roadmap. It is a little bit of a mix. But when you have prioritized the problems that you're looking to work on your roadmap, you can then add all of the different ideas that might be relevant from your backlog that are worthwhile looking at and that might be potential solutions to those problems. And like you can see in this example, the roadmap card itself and those ideas that are on it are not intended to really represent a release or a sprint. They can be at different stages in that process. Some indeed may never see the light of day. You might decide, you might have worked through a couple of those ideas and seen them through to delivery and be validating them. But say this interactive map is in the discovery phase, once we work that through our validation workflow, if we decide actually that it's not effective cost-wise, or we haven't had enough feedback on it, we might actually move that into not doing. But the point is, you've gathered what potential solutions there are that will solve this problem, and then we'll review them through the workflow. So by sharing this, by updating your workflow and then having that present on your roadmap as well against the ideas, you're also helping to communicate that ideas validation workflow to your colleagues again through the roadmap too.
Yeah, the roadmap view is actually another way of looking at things similar to the opportunity solution tree that Teresa Torres talks about. One of the valuable pieces of the opportunity solution tree is that it forces you to see and show your work that you're actually coming up with multiple ideas, multiple potential solutions to every problem, so you don't fall in love with any one idea. And then end up sort of down some rabbit hole of working on one thing which you thought was the best idea, which it never is if it was your first idea. So the whole idea of that is making sure that you've got this spread of different things that you're considering, so that you know that you have validated multiple lines of thought, so that you're most likely working on the right thing. The roadmap can actually do the same sort of thing, right? So you're looking at in terms of the big white blocks. Each of these cards represents the big problems that you want to tackle, and then the ideas that are attached represent the different ways that you might tackle it. And you don't necessarily have to do all of them. As a matter of fact, it's probably a bad idea to do all of them. That's just too much work, and sometimes you'll find that you will have solved the problem by doing only half of the ideas on any one card, or you'll find that some of them are actually bad ideas and don't deserve to be done, and that's totally fine. So your roadmap shouldn't become this laundry list of things to go do, but a way of showing a spread of things that you're considering, opportunities that you might go tackle, and a way of just showing your work and some of your assumptions that you're laying out for other people to see and understand.
Yeah, and importantly, as a previous project manager in another life, I think this is what makes your roadmap different. It's not a project plan, it's your strategic document. And so by using this approach, it makes that distinction quite clear then. So time for our next poll then, which Jana will get up for us, is do you actually use the workflows in ProdPad? So we'll give you a couple of seconds, and then Jana and I can share how we actually use the workflows in ProdPad, which is actually, we use it in quite a different way as well.
Great, so I've got that poll up. Everyone can jump in, and this poll is good because you can actually choose one and it's a valid poll. So very proud of this one. All right, we've got about half of us in here with their votes in. I'll give it some time for other people to jump in. In the meantime, I think I'll go back and answer one of the questions that somebody asked earlier. Pete asked, or actually just made a statement, but I'll address this one. He said that the single biggest issue that he's facing right now is that he doesn't want ProdPad to become another JIRA, this big backlog of stuff that where things go to die. And you know what, you're absolutely right. That would be my nightmare as well. One of the reasons why we built this is because JIRA has become this place where ideas and innovation just go and disappear to. And where ProdPad is different from that is that JIRA is designed, I've got this theory. There's a reason why a lot of product people hate JIRA. It's not that JIRA is a bad tool per se, because it is really good at managing that development flow. It's a task manager for product manager, for development teams. It helps you figure out which tasks need to be done, which sprint it's going to go out in, which team is working on it, and that sort of thing. And it's really good for that short-termism, right? That short-term flow of things, but is really, really bad for figuring out that sort of long-term flow of what should be done, right? That big picture strategy. And so what tends to happen is that JIRA becomes stuffed with all these things to do, but it's just entirely user-friendly and doesn't help you deduplicate. It doesn't help you understand where your ideas have gone. It doesn't help you understand how you might cut that up and work on stuff. It just sort of assumes that if something is in there, it's just got to be done. So what ProdPad does, it connects to JIRA and sits upstream to it so that ideas are specced out in ProdPad. Ideas are generated in ProdPad and they come from all these different sources. And we give you tools to sort through them. Like, for example, we'll help you figure out which ideas might match to different objectives on the roadmap and different initiatives on the roadmap. We'll point out which ones are most wanted by various customers. We'll help you identify if ideas are, we can do things like find me all the ideas that are revenue generating from this type of persona and that are not yet on the roadmap. You can do things like that and that are quick wins, for example. Do things like that and then start pulling those ideas up and making sure that they are not falling by the wayside. We'll flag up if ideas have not been touched in a few months or if they don't have enough detail. And it just helps you keep on top of that backlog in a much more flexible way than just this massive task list. We've designed it to be super user-friendly so that anyone else can help see it and understand it and help you keep on top of that backlog. On top of that, we also have the intelligent matching now, so that it stops you from prevents you from making duplicates and creating an even bigger mess. And then connects to JIRA so that you can see what kind of things are being worked through, and so you've got a nice tidy pull system from JIRA so that developers can work on stuff, know that they're working on the right things, do so in a nice, tidy, as fast as they can fashion without getting bogged down by tickets that may or may not ever get done. So ProdPad is designed to be a place where your ideas get nurtured, whereas JIRA is the place where those tickets just go get done. And it should take the weight off and provide the benefit of both worlds. And we have the results in for the poll here. So do you use the ideas workflow in ProdPad? Okay, so looks like it is not, oh, hold on, I gotta share those results. There we go, now you can see what I'm seeing.
Ah.
Not as many people use it as they should. So Emma, maybe you could enlighten us.
Yeah.
It seems like, what's that, about 50% either do or kind of use it, but another good chunk don't. And so perhaps you can walk us through what that might look like.
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that I have a lot of conversations with customers about, and I think it does hark back to what Jana you said before, in that people you come to ProdPad, you get ProdPad because you need help with road mapping, but actually nurturing your backlog is something else that we should be doing on a regular basis. And I think workflows is just one of those places that is going to help you. Sometimes it's because maybe you haven't agreed internally what that workflow looks like, so you're not sure about putting that sort of pen to paper and documenting that in ProdPad. But it's good that actually, no one said no, and I don't see it being useful. So I'm hoping that from us showing how to use the workflow, you can then look at implementing it. We are always happy to sense check what your workflow looks like. So if once after this call you have a go at setting up your workflow and you want to sense check that with us, then let us know. Equally, to those that don't always review it, maybe look again at your how often you're looking at your backlog, how you're going about nurturing it, and maybe the workflow would help with that as well. Great. So I'm very aware of time. So I think we've only got a few left though. So, oh yeah, go on, Jana.
One other thing I was going to add about the workflow and how it pertains to the JIRA thing. One of the things that a lot of people miss with a workflow is that they think about it in terms of a development workflow, which is, I think, comes from the whole Kanban way of thinking, in that you have a list of things to do, things that are being done by developers. Maybe you have a few stages that represent work being done by devs. And then you have a stage that represents it being tested, and another stage representing it being, going into a build or whatever sort of stage, and then a stage that represents it being done. But the ProdPad workflow is designed to represent the wider flow itself. So instead of just looking at it in terms of the development flow, there should be some stages that happen beforehand, right? So every idea starts off as new, but you might have stages like discovery, assessment, design, prototyping, things like that. So think about what kind of things need to happen before it goes into development. Have some sort of handover stage, which is pretty typical, and then have your development stages, which can map to your JIRA. So you've got your JIRA, your Trello, your GitHub, or whatever you're using on development, and then have stages that happen after that. Because just because the developers say it's done doesn't mean it's done. You know, there's other stages that you can map in ProdPad or that you can track in ProdPad, including things like validating that it solves the problem, telling the salespeople and training them up, making sure marketing has done something with it, making sure you've contacted customers, and then marking it as a success or a failure, or whatever the outcome was on it before you archive it and get it out of your way. So think of your workflow as not just the flow of you building it, but the flow of that idea existing from that initial spark through to it being done and signed off and closed off forever.
Yep. And leading on from that, and also what Jana mentioned before about how to create different views in ProdPad depending on what you're looking to work on your backlog. We're going to just look at a couple of those different views now, so that depending on what you're looking to do with your backlog that day, what you're looking to find or work through, ProdPad can help you to do that. So obviously we've looked at the workflow, and like Jana said, this should represent the entirety of your ideation process, from the initial research and validation steps through your development, and then out the other side, how you're going to validate that once it's been live, or equally document that it's, you're not going to do it. But we also have the list view, and all of those different aspects that we have on the ideas you can filter by. So like Jana mentioned, you can filter down by a specific product, and look for things that maybe aren't on the roadmap, and make sure that they all have, say, a description. And we actually have what we call triage mode, which you may or may not be aware of. So we've put those filters down. And then you can see here in the top right, we're browsing our backlog ideas based on certain filters that we've applied. And I can then work through those ideas, make sure they've got a description, then click next, make sure we've got description, maybe add in the business case, click next, and so on. So we try and make it really easy to work through what can be quite a large backlog of ideas. You can also use this view to filter down based on things like ideas with the most feedback, or those with designs on them. So really, this is a great view to be able to filter down and then work through certain ideas that you need to look at. And also, as Jana mentioned, we also have a chart view based on the priority scores that you'll give ideas. You can then see, in fact, let me just remove those filters. You can see all of your ideas in your backlog, and the color of the dots shows you how recently they're updated. So they start off bright pink, and then they fade to purple and then to gray. And you can also see by the size of the dot how much information is on that idea. So large dots are really detailed ideas. They're probably very well scoped, but then smaller ideas, don't have as much information on them. And again, we have the filters. So if you wanted to review all ideas, maybe in a certain stage in the workflow, maybe all the ones that are ready for development, you can see which ones are in the quick wins segment. Or equally, we do have some useful preset filters, including quick wins. So you could filter down by a specific product and just quick wins that aren't on the roadmap, and then see if any of those are relevant to solving some of the problems that are on your roadmap. So those are just a couple of quick views. If, as you're reviewing that backlog regularly, these are some of the views that you can use to filter down and get that working view that you want to, and update those ideas as relevant. And yeah. So today we've reviewed what ideas are and how you can be and should be gathering them from lots of different places into ProdPad, and also how ProdPad can manage those ideas through a validation process, whether they end up seeing the light of day or not. But the key benefits of using ProdPad for nurturing ideas is that it's inclusive. So all ideas are welcome into ProdPad because you have that open and transparent process to nurture them through and help communicate the process, but also the stage of those ideas to your colleagues in your wider business. So this also helps with the communication and understanding across your organization for how product works in your organization. And also, we try to make what can be quite an overwhelming backlog, which if you were using just the JIRA backlog before or a development backlog before, you might have just felt like there's just so many ideas, you can't really manage them properly. So like Jana mentioned, ProdPad has the different tools available to you to make that what can be overwhelming backlog just more manageable. You can filter it down to just that view that you need to do what you need to do today, whether it be you know, just ideas on your own specific product that aren't on the roadmap yet, or you just want to look at ones related to a specific persona, you know, and see what kind of feedback is on some of those ideas. But it'll just help you to surface that information to help you keep nurturing that backlog more regularly and keep that discovery process rolling alongside development. So that was the end of what I wanted to share with you today. I know we've probably got some more questions, but we're also happy to answer any others if you've got any more questions, or equally if you've got examples of, you know, if you've got best practice around how you nurture your backlog and you'd like to share that with everyone on the call today, then feel free to share that as well. And then Jana, if you could pop up the last poll once we've talked through some of these questions, maybe.
Absolutely, will do. So there's actually a few questions that are still open in the Q&A section. So if anybody else has any, then drop them in there. If you want to, you can also put up your hand and we can have you jump in and talk, or you can just type out your questions. There are actually a couple that are connected here. Gideon asked one question that was around the idea of having many ideas that are related to a theme or an initiative on the roadmap, but the ideas need to be spread out over the year. So how do you handle that? And he also asked about how do you track ideas that are in development but has elements or experiments that are released and in the validation parts of the workflow. There's actually one other layer of ideas that we didn't go into in very much detail today at all, which is that each idea, if needed, can be broken down into what we call user stories. And so you can actually, sometimes an idea, as Emma talked about at the beginning, sometimes an idea can be actually quite big, and it makes sense to break it down into smaller pieces, or what we call user stories. If you're using the terms themes, epics, and stories, then you might be familiar with that. And Gideon, you did use the word themes, which makes me think that you're familiar with this. Emma's showing us some great user stories here.
Yeah, they're really useful.
But these user stories can actually work either with the idea or work independently of it. So I could take this user story and put it on the roadmap in the now column, and the other one put it on a roadmap in the future. Or maybe I might have, you know, user story 1 in the roadmap for the mobile product, and user story 2 goes in the roadmap for the desktop product, right? So it makes sense for one team to go ahead with something first before another team. And same thing goes. You might take one area of an idea and validate it first before you move on to the next sections. So it's actually not uncommon to use the user stories and break them down that way. Some people ask whether they should use ideas or user stories or both. I would say it depends, and from what we've seen, most teams actually use a blended approach. Sometimes if the idea is small, it makes sense just to use the idea, right? You don't need to break it down in more detail, and ProdPad is not so dogmatic that it's going to make you break it down in more detail before you can move forwards. Sometimes you have an idea that's so big that you realize like you can't put the entire idea on one card and expect it to be all done at once. And so you start naturally breaking it down into those user stories, and that's when they come into their own and become useful for you. So use the user stories when needed. And if you don't need them, then don't use them. That's just fine as well. User stories can also be independently pushed to different tools. So you could take that user story and push it to JIRA independent of the idea itself, or you could send the entire idea and those user stories to JIRA or to Trello or to wherever else at the same time. So hopefully that helps answer that one. We have another question in here. Let me just capture this one. Okay, so Maxime asked about the outlined a problem around updating workflows in many different tools. So ProdPad does allow you to work with multiple tools. So welcome to our demo account here where we have all the tools synced here. You can actually push ProdPad ideas to multiple tools. It will only sync to one idea, to one tool at a time, because obviously if it's synced with JIRA and somebody's moving it around in there, it can't also be synced to a Trello board at the same time because those two would just overwrite each other constantly and that would be annoying. But you can take something, for example, and say, if you have like a design flow, then you can take an idea and push it to the design flow for a couple stages, and then take it again and push it onto a development flow for a few more stages, which is not an uncommon thing. So it is possible to do that sort of thing and sync it with different tools. Common use cases is that sometimes you have like, your mobile team uses Trello and your desktop team or your web team uses JIRA. That's totally fine. So we do support multiple tools and flows that way. It does all use the single workflow, but it might just mean that when you are pushing to different tools, it just skips some steps if those steps aren't represented in those other tools. And that's totally fine. So done with that one. Oh, I've got some other questions in here. I'm going to try to keep going through them. Okay, Jules has an easy one. Emma, can you show us how to change the categories in the workflow?
Yes. So if you're an admin, then you need to go to Account Settings and Workflow. And then you'll see here there's workflow stages. So you can either reorder what you've already got, but you can also change the names and descriptions of any of the stages. So yeah, hopefully now you know where that is, you can update it to reflect your own process.
Okay, so Lauren asks a good one. So they use workflows for ideas once they bubble up to actually being on the active roadmap, but everything else is just a reviewed status. Any ideas on further breakdown within this, basically, in quotes, not happening anytime soon status within the workflow?
Yeah, so I think this is where something maybe like in this example, we've got like a discovery. So, if it's not a priority, you're working through other ideas that maybe are more related to some of your problems on the roadmap, then they should just sit in something like discovery or a research stage. It depends if you want it to be further than reviewed. And obviously, as we've discussed today, like there is a benefit to keeping all your ideas moving along a little bit. So maybe have a think about what else you might want to do with ideas between reviewed and then ready for development. So a design or research or priority scoring, for example. Jana, I don't know whether you've seen any other examples.
What you've just outlined there makes sense. Having them in discovery and one or some sort of stage like that, like needs more information or whatever it is. Just having an explicit stage, being like, this is not moving forwards because it's not ready yet.
Yeah.
But it's okay to call something not ready yet.
Yeah.
What will happen is that if that idea sits there for more than 3 months, it'll flag it back up, which means that if you're using ProdPad and listening to its flags saying, this idea hasn't been looked at, it means that you're looking at every idea in your backlog 4 times a year, which is not excessive, but it keeps it front of mind enough so that you're able to spot the patterns, connect the dots, and keep your backlog tidy enough that it doesn't become this black hole where you've just sort of lost the plot, which happens way too often with tools that don't have that level of transparency.
Yeah, equally, I'd say don't be afraid of putting them as not doing. I think everyone, we sort of hesitate with putting it as not doing because, what if it gets lost? But in ProdPad, you can put it as not doing, you can archive it, and you will always find it again in search. So don't be afraid to process that idea and put it as not doing, even if that's right now. It could be something you come back to 6 months, 2 years time, but that's fine. It's in ProdPad. You'll be able to find it again.
Okay. All right, moving on. All right, Pete and Mark both asked a question around how often are you keeping your backlog maintained, and who is it doing it? Is it a team or individually? So we triage the ideas backlog in unsorted. It's actually kind of a mixture of us who do it here. Sometimes it's one person who'll go through it. Sometimes it comes up in a meeting and we'll just sort of bash through it as needed. So it's kind of as on an as needed basis, but it's usually something that one person can handle. It gets handed around because sometimes somebody's on vacation and, we want to make sure it doesn't get stacked up. But for the most part, it's something that an individual can do, and just triage that unsorted list, which is sort of that minimum viable nurturing of your backlog, just keeping the unsorted list handled or nurtured or maintained. How often do we do it? As we said, a couple times a week, we keep an eye on it. It's easy for us to see what's going on because every time a new idea is created, it creates something in Slack, and we see the daily and weekly digests coming into our emails. So we see a lot of the ProdPad stuff going through, and it reminds us to go in and keep on top of it. Question from Gideon. So following up on his question, so can you show a user story on a now card and also on a later card? The same user story can't be shown on the now and the later. You might be able to do that, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, I think technically you can, but we'd question why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'd probably recommend having like one story for now and another story for later, so that if you do it now, then you're doing something else later.
You can also link ideas together now. So it might be that you actually want to break down your idea into two. Have that one idea you're working on now with those user stories, and have a linked idea with the other user stories you'll come back to, and then put that on a later card. Something like that might be the best approach. I would just think about how granular you've got those ideas and user stories. Yeah.
And always happy to have a follow-up chat afterwards if you still have questions about that. Yeah, always curious in your own use case and what you're trying to achieve there. But yeah, happy to go over that.
Yep.
And that is the last of the open questions there. But if anybody has anything that they want to follow up with, then we're really easy to reach. We're always happy to have conversations with you. Myself, Emma, Andrea, Ellie, we're all here. We're all happy to chat. Yeah, Emma, do you have anything you want to add to finish us off?
No, I think if you could pop up the last poll, we'd really appreciate your feedback on the webinar today. We have recently introduced these product success sessions. I think this is about the third or fourth one we've done, but we really want to make these suitable for your needs. So if you could share your feedback with us, we'd really appreciate it. As Jana said, reach out to us at any time. You can always chat to us in the in-app chat. And we can book calls. You can sense check your roadmap, your workflow with us. And also we have a really great help center, which has our previous webinars on there for our success sessions, but also our other webinars, which are also include really great tips around things like OKRs, and Jana did a great one recently about avoiding the pitfalls of vanity metrics. So if you're looking for more best practices on product management as well, our webinars are a great place to have a look too. So check out our help center or reach out if you have any questions.
All right, thanks everyone for jumping in on that poll. Your feedback really does help us improve these sessions and learn more, and gives us some great ideas as to what we're going to cover in future sessions as well. Looks like a really split vote on that. So Emma, I think we got our work cut out for us. We got to talk about everything. So we will be back. Lots more of these product success sessions to come.
Yeah, watch this space.
Yes, okay, and that's everyone. So thank you so much for everyone jumping in on that poll. Until next time, thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.